With exactly 2 months left in office, President Joe Biden is apparently trying to pull out all the stops in a vain attempt to reverse course on this war between Russia and Ukraine, trying desperately to do anything at all to change the dynamics. Now, as you know, because we've been giving you all the details, anybody who's been watching Daniel Davis Deep Dive has all the information that that's not even possible. There is no silver bullet. There is no weapon system. There is no quantity of anything that's going to turn anything around, because war is about men, not machines, not money. And that's all we have to throw at it. But those realities and that demonstrable truth doesn't seem to be affecting the president of the United States, because he continues to take action which have the possibility not of not helping Ukraine. That's a given. They have the possibility of expanding the war and possibly even drawing us in. To help explain why that is, we have today one of our favorite guests, Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst and also author at Sonar21.com, son of the New American Revolution on Substack. Larry, welcome back to the show as always.
Always glad to be with you, Danny. Thanks, man.
Always great to have you here, because, man, you always cut through the BS. And one of the reasons we love having you on is because nobody owns you. You don't have you don't have to worry about any funders. Just say whatever. You say what you think is actually true all the time, which we really appreciate.
Yeah, I took that vow of poverty, so
and we're the richer for it, if I can just say. Listen, let's go into some of the things. First of all, not that Biden's been saying, because he hasn't given any public statements yet, which is kind of curious. In fact, let me start with that, even because there has been numerous. It started off in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, that the U.S. senior officials had confirmed that these weapons were allowed. Then you have all kinds of other leaders in Europe, not the least of which was Volodymyr Zelensky, acknowledging that they have. And now then we have all kinds of reports that both Storm Shadow missiles from the UK and ATACMS from the US have been engaged on Russian soil. Yet we don't have anything from the White House officially confirming this, or anything from Biden. Why do you think that is?
They're trying to play plausible deniability, I think, still. Except, this has been in the works for some while. They sent over the long-range ATACMS, the ATACMS that could go out to 300 kilometers or 190 miles. Those went over in March. So they've been there for at least 6 months, 7 months. And the quickness with which the Ukrainians immediately, once they supposedly got the green light, launched, was, I think, further reinforced that the United States had anticipated doing something like this. The question comes back to why, because it's not accomplishing anything militarily, and every time that Ukraine fires an ATACMS missile, that's one less that they're going to have going forward. Right now they've almost shot 40%. Think about this, Danny. They've shot 40% of what they have in inventory. They were supposed to have about 50. They've shot 18. That works out to about 36%. And that's in 2 days.
And now let me ask this, because I think this is a critical question. How many of those 18 have hit their targets?
None. Maybe one. The Russians claimed that they dinged one, but it fell and it caught some things on fire, but it was no big deal. But out of 12, 11 out of 12 get brought down. This is turning out to be a great advertisement for Russian air defense. And look at the cost of these things. Every single one, they cost between $1 and $1.5 million. So let's take a middle, 1.2. They've now, they're now about $15 million in, and it's just, and accomplishing what? It'd be one thing if they were firing these at actual military targets that mattered to Russia. If they were hitting a command headquarters, if they were hitting a major logistics hub, if they were taking out a base where there were actual modern weapons stored. But what they're shooting at is like they're blowing up the old hen house. It's having no effect whatsoever on the operations tempo of the Russian military on its ability to resupply itself.
Well, now, Larry, I want to, before I leave too far from this topic here, I want to look at a different aspect of this, which nobody is, and definitely none of the TV generals who have just been given hideous advice all throughout this war, but especially on this one, it's the worst imaginable. I actually wrote something on that for the National Interest, which will come out later this afternoon. But there is an unexamined aspect of this, which I think poses a significant danger and risk to America, in that our best long-range missiles are being intercepted, or electronic warfare is knocking them out, because we have allowed them to go in there. We have basically handed over to Russia this incredible lab opportunity to figure out how to defeat our stuff. And I assure you, or you can assure me, actually, if that's more to it, that Russia is going to share that with any adversary of the United States. How much of a risk is our national security because of what we've done?
Oh, significant. Well, let me put it this way. Our national security would not be at risk if we just mind our own damn business, keep our hands to ourselves, and stay at home. Okay? But we're like the neighborhood child molester. We keep going out and finding other people to bother and to create mayhem in their societies, and for what purpose? I mean, the purpose to go after Russia was to get a hold of its resources. So being driven by greed and lust are not necessarily noble callings. But what's happened in the course of the last 2.5 years, can you name one weapon system that's functioned in theater where people around the world are going, wow, look at what those Americans have? Not a single
I was going to say, well, yeah, I could. The Kinzel has been pretty good. The FFV, Americans, sorry.
Yeah.
None of them. I mean, every time. I mean, first it was the 777s, the howitzers. I mean, they're howitzers. They lob things. But you didn't hear much about those after the beginning. And then you had the HIMARS. That made a big splash initially, especially on I think it was the Antonovsky Bridge over the Dnieper. And then all of a sudden you didn't hear anything about them, and haven't for now, like what, a year and a half or something like that. ATACMS had a couple of splashes at first. And now then the only thing we hear about them is when the missiles don't find the target.
Right. And so it's not, this is bad news for the U.S. defense industry, because they already charge, a pretty penny for to buy their overpriced crap. But other countries are looking and say, hey, what really works? Patriot missile battery? Hey, even if you buy one, you're not necessarily, hey, we'll sell you this battery. Man, it's great when you can launch it. How about the missiles? Oh, well, we don't have those in inventory right now. They'll be ready in 2 or 3 years. So what? Yeah. We're supposed to wad up, put wads of paper in the barrel and fire those like, giant spitballs. So what's come out of this is exposing really the corruption of the U.S. defense industry and our entire national security. I don't even want to call it policy, because policy implies that there's thinking, that there's a strategic plan in place, that there are objectives that you're trying to reach. No, this is just we're like the organ grinder with the organ grinder monkey, man. We're just cranking the machine to get the monkey to dance. And in the process, what we've done is created the most expensive military in the world, which has proven to be the least effective. And we don't want to come to grips with that.
Yeah, I mean, what we have is great if we're going against, insurgents in Iraq, or a Taliban that has no air force, military infrastructure, or anything else in the Taliban in Afghanistan. Yeah, we'll win those tactical battles all day long, though we couldn't win the war strategically. And now that if we have to fight a peer, wow, aside from the issue that, there's twin things that are working both in opposite directions against our interest. On the one hand, you just talked about there, we have provided a beautiful laboratory for our enemies to figure out how to defeat our stuff, even without having to go against us specifically. Which is as easy as it could be. But secondly, they're going through all this wartime innovation that just rapidly goes through iterations of discovery, so that now they have stuff we don't even know about and we've not even prepared for. If we had to fight the Russia right now, I don't think we would be much better than the Ukraine side has. And that's a shock to many, but I don't know that that's untrue.
Well, the reality is we are fighting Russia, and we're fighting it via proxy in Ukraine. This Ukrainian army at the outset, back in February of 2022, was really the second largest army in Europe. And it was the best trained of all the armies in Europe because of all of the joint NATO training exercises that had been undertaken since, good heavens, going back to 2007. So prior to the start of this conflict in 2022, for the previous 15 years, United States and the NATO allies had been conducting on at a minimum two military exercises a year inside Ukraine, and this was a whole panoply, everything from cyber warfare, carrying out offensive operations, amphibious landings. It ran the gamut. So what Russia has demonstrated is that it's not like it hasn't just fought Ukraine. Ukraine has been dependent upon the supply line, the line of communication from NATO, from the United States, the financial support it has received from both Europe and the United States, the supply of tanks, armored personnel carriers, mortars, artillery shells, but then more importantly, radar and ISR information, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And that's what's really coming into play now with the attack of missiles, because those have to actually be programmed by U.S. military personnel with the appropriate clearances. And the Russians know this. So that's in part why they're seeing this. This is an attack by the United States on them. On the other hand, they're also taking into account these missiles so far have not hit anything, but they put the West on notice that if you present a critical threat, and I think the key word there is critical, and critical implies that there's really life and death involved, that there are if you're killing Russian civilians now going forward, then the Russian response can be up to and including the use of a nuclear weapon. That was what this change in doctrine on Monday said. But what we've seen so far with these PR launches by Ukraine, they're firing off this very expensive equipment. They're not hitting anything militarily, and they're not inflicting any civilian casualties. So I think at this point the Russians are content to say, okay, let the buffoons shoot their load. Go ahead. It doesn't affect the course of the war, because the actual course of the war on the ground for Russia, it's moving at an increasingly rapid pace every single day. I just saw a video yesterday. It was horrific. Of the Russians took out this Ukrainian troop carrier. It had about 8 guys on the deck of this troop carrier, as opposed to I think about 10 inside. The thing was on fire. All but one of the guys on the top deck were dead, and the corpses were slowly catching fire. Meanwhile, the thing came to a halt, and as guys tried to get out, they were being shot. And there were at least 12 casualties, 12 KIA right there. And later in the video, when the Russians came up to secure the site, after the fire had died out, you had nothing but charred bodies on top. And there were multiple videos like this in recent days. We're not talking 1 or 2 KIA, dozens. So right now, the Ukrainians are suffering minimal 2,000 killed and wounded per day, and those numbers are increasing. And then on top of it, someone came up with a clever idea of let's do a time-lapse photography of the cemeteries in Kiev, Dnipro, Kharkov, and Odessa. And so you get it from 2022 to 2024. Those cemeteries have tripled, quadrupled, quintupled in size. Depends on the cemetery. So it's a nightmare. And here is Gary's showing right away. Yeah. Here comes these guys trying to get out of a troop carrier. Here comes this drone with the Russians, and look at them.
Right.
Everybody in there is now a dead man.
Yeah, and I saw too much of that myself during my one big armored battle in Desert Storm. A lot of those exact same things you described. I saw the grisly remains of it, which is why I despise war so much, because I know the horrific consequence it has. Um,
It
so
wasn't just the visuals. It was the smell.
yeah, I
I mean,
wasn't going to go there, but
well, no,
that's
but I
still
mean,
with me. Uh,
how do you convey the smell of those kinds of situations? I mean, it's horrific. It's a horror
yes,
show,
yes,
and that's what people don't understand, because they do the video game thing, or they watch it on television, and it's all really antiseptic, and they can get up and go to the bathroom whenever they want. I mean, these are human beings' lives that are being extinguished because we are enabling it in the United States. Joe Biden in particular, and the
yeah,
crew around him.
and he has an accomplice in this, and that is in the form of Volodymyr Zelensky, who is the happy accomplice and the enabler of all these things on the ground. And to his credit, Trey Yingst of Fox News went and interviewed Zelensky, and actually one of the few guys I've ever seen that actually asked him some hard questions. Watch this.
Last week, you criticized German Chancellor Olaf Scholz for speaking on the phone with Russian President Putin. Why?
According to my opinion, that is really a Pandora's box. Putin's isolation is also the pressure against him. We fight not only by weapons, as you properly said, by diplomacy. Diplomacy is so important, and only diplomacy can end this war.
But, sir, how can you have diplomacy without talking?
No, we're talking. But after you know what will be soon. What Chancellor got after phone call? Nothing new.
And so your
Only
position right now is that Western leaders should not be speaking with Putin?
intelligence of Western leaders, they had contact on the level of intelligence during this war with Russian side. They had a lot. Europe, United States, everybody they had. But it was not, against the political isolation of Putin. It was on the level of intelligence. Why? Because you have not recognized Putin as the president, because he is a killer. Otherwise, you will destroy this isolation, political isolation.
Okay, let's just. I want to restrict to two remaining things from that clip there. First of all, one of the things he said is, and he's mentioned it both at the beginning and at the end, is he wants the political isolation of Russia. Somehow he thinks that's going to get to a situation to where he can have a negotiated settlement on terms favorable to Kiev. What say you?
Yeah, this notion that we're going to isolate Russia politically, it's like, look in the mirror, folks. It's called projection. The only ones becoming isolated now from the world are the United States, Europe, and Zelensky. We saw that on display actually at the latest G20 meeting, which took place in Brazil. That although the West, formerly, let's call it that core of United States, along with its European allies, could sort of force the agenda, failed to do so. Why? Well, because countries like Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa are now in league with as part of BRICS. Other countries, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, are coming along. So also the West no longer has that kind of authority or kind of clout. And so here is Zelensky pursuing what's really a fantasy, that he's going to isolate Putin. I just saw today there's a publication out. It was the New York Sun, claiming that Russia's economy is teetering on the brink. Apparently, they didn't talk to the International Monetary Fund, because the International Monetary Fund yesterday released a report saying, hey, the Russian economy is a lot stronger than we thought. It's now the fourth largest in the world. Think about that. Russia's got the fourth largest economy, exceeded only by China, the United States, and India. It's blown past the United Kingdom, Germany, all of Europe. And this was, the World Bank had earlier come out and claimed that Russia was number 4 by virtue of purchasing power parity. But now the IMF weighed in and said, "Yep, it's number 4, and actually they're probably undercounting what's happening." So instead of this weakening Russia and putting its economy in dire straits, the only ones whose economies are in dire straits are Germany and the United Kingdom. And what are they doing? They're taking money from their own people. They're in England. They're cutting the money allocated so people can heat their homes to send it to Ukraine. And they just got hit with one of the earliest snowstorms and bitter cold in the UK in years. And so at some point, this thing's going to erupt in terms of the complete breaking of the relationship between Europe and Ukraine, because they're not going to be able to sustain this. Ukraine, Zelensky, they're going to be totally on their own.
Okay, and so speaking of that, and especially in the Europe, that was the second thing of this clip that I wanted to talk about, because on the one hand, he makes that the words that came out of his mouth are right. Hey, we have to have a diplomatic solution. We have to have a negotiated solution. It's not going to be one on the battlefield. And then he says, okay, yeah, but Olaf Scholz actually wants to do that. And he says, yeah, that was dumb. It's a Pandora's box. And then he asked the question, how can you have a negotiated settlement if you're not talking? Could you make any sense out of what he actually said in response?
No, I mean, he doesn't he's like the guy, he's standing naked in a snowdrift. Okay. And there's a guy standing at the door with some warm clothing. Who's got the leverage in that negotiation? Okay. Negotiation's part of need. What do you need? Well, at this point, Ukraine needs everything. They need more men. They need people who are trained to operate weapons. They need weapon systems that they can operate. They need the munitions to operate those weapon systems and employ them. And they need the Russians to go away and leave them alone. But that's not happening. And so what does Russia need? Is Russia suffering massive catastrophic losses? No. Are they suffering shortfalls in supplies? No. Are they suffering shortfalls in manpower? No. Are they not getting invited to the U.S. Christmas party? Oh, damn. Oh, my God. Yeah,
isolation.
Yeah, we're out of luck. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is, that we think they think they can employ the high school tactics of, well, we're not going to talk to you and we're not going to let you sit with us at lunch. Russia doesn't care.
You might want to reconsider that. And the interview went on where Yanks didn't specifically say Trump, but you can see his hypothetical question had a very specific target.
You said the U.S. can't force you to sit at the negotiating table. What if the U.S. government cuts military funding to Ukraine?
If they will cut, I think we will lose. Of course, anyway, we will stay, we will fight. We have our production, but it's not enough to prevail. And I think it's not enough to survive. But that will be, if such choice will be American choice. So we will decide what we will have to do.
Yeah. So there is somebody coming in. So the Biden didn't win. His administration didn't win. So somebody is coming in, and everything they have said so far is they're going to immediately seek a negotiated solution. Now, with that reality now, not a prospect, not a hypothetical, but that is coming, then why would Zelensky want to continue trying a military force? And then the bigger question, why would the Biden administration want to go? And I think I saw this morning that they're also giving a new category of other weapon systems to the Ukraine side with some landmines, I believe, that were banned in some regards. And then, of course, with the long-range missiles, apparently UK has joined in. What is the reason for this when we know what's coming on January 20th?
Perhaps, and this is just, one pot, I've been thinking through the scenarios. If they can start a war and create a wartime situation that could be used to justify not turning power over to Donald Trump, that could be one possible play. That they could declare a state of emergency in the United States because we are now at war with Russia. that we cannot allow the normal transfer of power because we have to have the.
Come on, man. There's no way that the anyone in the administration could actually think that there's a mechanism for that. I mean, surely they wouldn't be thinking that. Right?
Right. Oh, listen, I don't rule anything out with these people. I mean, look, the very people who think it's a good idea to give Ukraine medium-range missiles that can shoot into Russia, and that Russia has declared would be a red line for a nuclear war, the same ones who think that that's a good idea, I don't count anything out.
Fair point.
You're making the assumption that you're dealing with some rational people. And yet every one of their decisions with respect to this war have been irrational, or have not been, the decisions have not been made in the best interest of the United States. Because
I'm sorry, but this perfectly illustrates kind of what you're saying, I believe. Jake Sullivan was asked, why are we giving long-range weapon systems to Ukraine now at this 11th hour, and with the potential it's going to draw us into the war? Watch his answer.
The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, today has responded saying that, yes, there is no official confirmation, and if there were, it would mean that there was direct involvement of the United States in the war.
If the U.S. were to authorize the use of any weapon system, including this weapon system, it wouldn't mean direct U.S. participation in the war. It would mean a continuation of the policy we've had since the war began, which is that we supply the means to Ukraine to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and they fight the war.
Let me put that in a different context. Listen, someone asked me, why do I hold a pen during my show here? And I'm like, I'm not holding a pen during our show. I drink coffee. Obviously, this is what this is. That's kind of how that strikes me. When you're saying something that's so self-evidently untrue, and yet he says it with conviction. I mean, who does he think he's fooling? Does he think that Vladimir Putin's going to be watching from the Kremlin, is going to go, oh, okay, cool. So it's not really the U.S. All right, boys, you'll stand down here because it's just the Ukrainians. Who's buying this?
Well, let's understand what he is. My understand, as I recall, I don't think he's a lawyer. I don't think if he does have legal training, they ought to, pull his law degree, because he doesn't understand this concept of being an accomplice. That, if I own a bar and I know that you're intoxicated, and I say, hey man, here, have another drink on the house and drive home safe, and then you go out and kill somebody, I'm complicit in the manslaughter. I'm complicit in the death that you cause. If I take it to another level where I come to you and say, hey, Danny, I'm going to give you a gun and I'm going to load it with ammunition, and I want you to go down the road and shoot this person. Do you think that because I didn't go actually press that trigger, that I'm not responsible? So that's what he's trying to claim. The reality is the United States has been complicit in this war since the outset. And I'm talking about going back to 2014. We were the ones who were behind the Maidan coup. We have provided annual military training for the Ukrainians, and the enemy in those, the bad guy, the villain, is always Russia. So we've been training and encouraging the Ukrainians to fight Russia for 15 years. And then to step back and say, well, gee, we're not responsible for this. It's absurd. And at least some Americans are starting to wake up and recognize how ridiculous this is.
Well, and let me tell you somebody else who is also not buying any of it, and it's Sergei Lavrov.
Long-range missiles are going to be applied from Ukraine into Russian territory. It will also mean that they are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly.
Now, that is pretty unambiguous there, that he's not, obviously buying any of the BS or any of the word salad distractions that is being trying to go on. But so he also said that they'll respond in a way that they think is in their interest. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, in that just because we fired the weapons in there doesn't automatically mean that they're going to strike Ramstein Air Base, for example, or something to that effect. But let me ask you this: if, say, the next round, whether it's Storm Shadow or ATACMS, if some of those actually get through the air defenses and they do strike, say, a Su-35 base or something like that, and they actually destroy some equipment, what might Russia do next?
They will respond in kind. Today already, we've seen that all of the embassies in Kiev, the United States, the European embassies, they've shut down. They told their people run away because they're fully anticipating a massive Russian strike in Kiev and retaliation for what just took place. I don't see Russia retaliating and going after civilian targets. That's not their MO. They always go after the military side. And what the West, a lot of the impression of what's going on is inaccurate because the West is not getting a good picture of what Russia is doing almost on a daily basis in terms of missile, drone, and bomb strikes, the FABs, the bombs that fly forward 60 to 100 kilometers and then hit a target. They're not seeing the reports of what Russia is doing, a devastation on a level that people just don't comprehend. So it's not like Russia's sitting back and doing nothing, and so you always weigh the consequences. It's like, I put it in terms of, personal defense or home defense. If you catch somebody trying to break into your house, and at least if you're in Florida and they try to get through the front door, you can shoot them. They don't have to be carrying a weapon. If they're trying to break into your house, you can shoot them. However, if you hear somebody scratching at the door, you go open the door, they turn around and start running away and are not showing you a weapon, you can't shoot them. You might want to, and it might feel good, but you can't. It's not the right thing to do. And that sort of legal mindset, that's very much how the Russians are. Because look at what they did. They'd been talking for 3 months that they were revising the nuclear doctrine. But they went through the formalized review process, very bureaucratic, very legalistic, dotting I's, crossing T's. And then on Monday, Vladimir Putin says, hey, here's our new doctrine. We've now approved it. It's all gone through. And this is going to be our doctrine going forward. They very much went through that legal process, not just for show, but it's part of what they are. And that's what we fail to understand. They take this legalistic theory, this concept of international legal order, very seriously. And what they keep coming up against is the United States only uses it when it's convenient for us. We don't enforce it universally. And it's applied sort of on the friends and family basis. If you're friends and family, you don't have to abide by it. Everybody else gets punished. Russia's not that way. So what they're looking at is, did this actually cause significant harm? And if we don't stop it, is it going to cause additional harm? And in that case, they will strike back and strike back hard.
And listen, in the last few minutes we have here, I'm going to play something to somebody who seems oblivious to this, and it's another one of the TV generals, General Jack Keane, who seems to ignore everything that you just said, all the logic, all the rational thoughts you just said. And he's saying, okay, cool, Biden, I'm glad you authorized this, but how about a little bit more?
This is a step in the right direction. We've got to give Ukraine more leverage and also push Putin into those negotiations, and certainly releasing the long-range missiles to be able to attack inside of Russia, where Russia's been attacking all these since the war began, into Ukraine, makes compelling sense. Also, the Brits and the French are going to be able to do the same. The problem is they're restricting it just to the Kursk area, and that doesn't make any sense. It's another paralysis on a part of the administration, taking the knee to the threat of nuclear weapons. Can you imagine Putin is going to use a nuclear weapon now in the next couple of months before the Trump administration comes in? Does that make any sense to anybody in the world?
Okay, first of all, this mocking of any risk of nuclear escalation is by itself. He should be kicked off the air and not allowed to spout any of his comments. But I want to focus in on one of the other things he says. This will force Putin into negotiations. Please comment on that if you would.
Yeah, well, I go back to the naked man and the snowdrift. You got to have some leverage if you're going to go into negotiations. We don't have. Let's say we had 10,000 Attacker missiles and could pour those 10,000 Attacker missiles into Ukraine, and that Ukraine could fire off 500 a day. Under those circumstances, Russia would start feeling some pain. But then Russia is not a passive bystander in this. They also get a say. And what Putin said on Monday is, if we face that kind of threat, we're going to go nuclear. And we'll use the nukes against Ukraine, we'll use them against Europe, and we'll use them against the United States. And candidly, neither the United States or Europe, even though they have nuclear weapons, and I know when I say this, it's controversial and a lot of people will argue about it, but I genuinely believe that Russia's in a position that it could use nukes and not be destroyed, because it has air defense systems capable of defeating at least a significant number of the ballistic missiles that would be fired in retaliation by the West. And so when you've got that as sort of an edge, and they've actually been able to test it now in combat. It's not theoretical, because they've been able to detect, shoot down a variety of these missiles, the TACMs, the HIMARS, the Storm Shadows, the Taurus. So Russia's not dealing with theoretical possibilities. It's dealing with the real world. And that's what's so puzzling, that, Keen's not an ignorant man. He's not unread. He did have some education, but to say things that are just so abjectly stupid and then to double down on them is puzzling, because it's not taking into account what's actually happened over the last 2.5 years. We don't have to imagine it. And people like Keane will say, well, yeah, look, the Russians haven't been able to do X, Y, and Z in 2.5 years. Hey, dude, we were in Afghanistan for 18 years, and we couldn't beat a bunch of goat herders that were carrying AK-47s. So just shut up. Until you've established the standard, you've got no business to talk.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm actually have a phone call that's coming in from someone that I have to take this for.
Okay.
But thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
All right, Danny.